911, what's your emergency?
It's the trainer! She's under the water! He's not letting go! There's blood! Please, you have to send someone now!
Eliza Morgan was Oceanica Dome's shining star, a gifted Orca trainer whose bond with Nero, the park's prized Orca, was unlike anything the public had ever seen. For years, they captivated audiences in a dance of trust and precision. But on one summer afternoon, that connection shattered in front of hundreds. What unfolded was not a mistake, not a freak accident, but the devastating result of warning signs ignored and instincts underestimated. This is the true story of Eliza's final show, of a creature born to roam the open sea, and of a system that put performance above protection. It's a tragedy that sparked outrage, exposed buried truths, and raised questions we can no longer afford to ignore. If Eliza could fall victim to the very animal she loved most, what does that mean for all the others? Like, share, and subscribe to help bring these stories into the light. The roar of the crowd echoed off the walls of Oceanica Dome, bouncing over the glistening surface of the main tank. Sunlight filtered through the curved glass ceiling, casting shifting reflections onto the water. From the stadium seats came claps, cheers, and whistles, an eager audience waiting for the spectacle they had come to expect. At center stage, Eliza Morgan emerged with a calm, steady stride, her black-gray wetsuit hugging her athletic frame. A soft smile played on her lips, the kind that came not from pride, but from deep familiarity. She was 33, the youngest lead trainer Oceanica had ever appointed, and today was hers to command. Gliding just behind her was Nero, a towering 12,000-pound orca whose immense black and white body moved like silk beneath the surface. The crowd erupted again at the sight of him. Nero had become the undisputed star of the park's headline performance, and no one connected with him quite like Eliza did. Every flick of her fingers, every tilt of her head, he responded. Their bond was more than training. It was a quiet understanding, built over years of shared hours in the water, unspoken signals, and unwavering patience. Eliza had never seen her work as a job. Since she was a child, the ocean had always felt like home. Her earliest memories were of sketching whales in the margins of her school books and begging her parents for weekend trips to the aquarium. Working with orcas wasn't a career she chose. It was something she always knew she was meant to do. And with Nero, that sense of purpose reached its highest point. Nero had not been born in captivity. He was taken from the frigid waters off the North Atlantic nearly 2 decades ago, a fact Eliza wrestled with often, though quietly, still, in the sterile, chlorinated world of Oceanica Dome. She had done everything to give him meaning, structure, and companionship. He wasn't just an animal to her. He was a partner, a friend, a mirror. To many on the team, Eliza's connection to Nero bordered on uncanny. Trainers spoke in hushed tones about how he would track her every movement, even outside of sessions. She could dive beside him, unprotected, and he would drift near her with astonishing precision. It was as if they moved with the same pulse. As the opening music swelled and the crowd leaned forward in anticipation, Eliza positioned herself near the tank's edge, ready to begin. The light bathed her figure in a golden hue, dancing across the water's surface. Nero circled below, waiting for her signal. Everything appeared perfect, 2 beings performing as one, in harmony with the rhythm of the sea. But beneath that polished surface, something unseen was beginning to shift. Nero was never just another performing orca. There was something mesmerizing about him, the sleek curve of his dorsal fin slicing through the water, the way sunlight shimmered along his back, the quiet strength he carried in every movement. To the audience, he was a marvel. To Eliza, he was more than that. He was a mystery she had spent years trying to understand. And yet, even after a decade of shared routines and synchronized breath, there were corners of his mind she could never fully reach. In training sessions, she sometimes noticed moments that unsettled her, though she rarely admitted it aloud. A tail slap against the concrete side of the tank, delivered with a force that felt more frustrated than playful. A sudden dive when a cue was given, disappearing into the deep with no intention of resurfacing on time. These were brief, Isolated incidents, never violent, but never quite right either. Each time, the staff would brush it off. "He's a wild animal," they'd say. "They all have moods." Eliza nodded, but part of her kept wondering. Still, the shows went on. Nero would rise beneath her with a practiced grace, lifting her high into the air before spinning her gently back toward the surface. Their timing was flawless, their choreography seamless. The crowd's cheers were like waves crashing in her ears. But under that applause, Eliza sensed something had begun to change. It was subtle at first. Nero's responses grew slower, his gaze more distant. He started hesitating at signals he used to know by heart. At times, he would linger just out of reach, watching her with eyes that felt unfamiliar, not aggressive, not fearful, but unreadable. Eliza told herself it was fatigue, the long hours of repetition, or perhaps the gradual weight of captivity pressing down on him. Everyone has off days, she reminded herself, even Orcas. She never felt afraid. Not truly. Her connection with Nero ran too deep, too. She had spent years nurturing that bond, speaking to him not just through gestures, but through presence, through breath, through trust. What she felt instead was something quieter, a tug of uncertainty, an ache she couldn't name. She loved Nero not because he was safe, but because he was wild, and in that wildness she saw beauty. Yet even love has limits when it rests on the illusion of control. Eliza didn't realize that the trust she believed unshakable had begun to erode. Not because of one moment, but because of many small ones. Signals missed, looks held a little too long, distance where there had once been ease, and when a creature shaped by the sea begins to pull away from what tethers it. The consequences may not announce themselves until it's far too late. That afternoon, sunlight poured through the arched glass roof of Oceanica Dome, blanketing the stage in a golden haze. The heat clung to the air, mixing with the scent of saltwater and sunscreen. Families filed into the grandstands, their voices buzzing with anticipation. Children waved souvenir flags while parents adjusted cameras, hoping to capture one more magical moment. The marquee read, "Dance with Giants," the show that drew more crowds than any other, backstage. Eliza stood alone for a brief moment of stillness. She closed her eyes and inhaled slowly, centering herself the way she always did before a performance. Today's routine was one of the more intricate ones, requiring precision and perfect timing. Nero would rise beneath her, lifting her from the water with the tip of his rostrum in a dramatic arc. They had rehearsed it dozens of times. It was a sequence the audience loved, a celebration of strength and grace, made possible only through trust. The opening chords of the theme music echoed across the arena, signaling the start. Eliza emerged into the light with confident steps, offering a wave to the cheering crowd. Her gaze moved instinctively toward the pool. Beneath the surface, Nero's black and white silhouette drifted just out of view. Normally, he would have been in position by now, waiting for her first cue. She gave the signal a familiar, fluid motion of the hand, but Nero didn't respond right away. Instead, he glided by slowly, his dorsal fin breaking the surface without urgency. Eliza held her smile. She knew the audience was watching. She masked the flicker of concern rising in her chest and repeated the cue, this time adding a subtle vocal reinforcement. Nero turned. He began to approach, but his path was not quite the one they had practiced. When he reached her, he didn't lift her with the strength and precision he usually demonstrated. Instead, he nudged her gently, a playful push that sent her backward into the shallow end. Laughter rose from the stands, rippling across the arena like a wave. Eliza played along, laughing too, brushing water from her face as she raised a hand in mock surrender. It wasn't the first time Nero had improvised. Orcas, like all intelligent beings, had their moods, their flair. Still, something about his timing felt off a hesitation she hadn't seen before, a delay that lingered. She watched him circle away, then loop back toward her with unexpected speed. Her smile faltered for just a moment, then came the eye contact, brief but distinct. The orca's gaze met hers, and in that single second, Eliza sensed something unfamiliar. It wasn't the calm recognition she was used to. It wasn't affection or playfulness. It was distant, detached, and for the first time in their long partnership, she couldn't read him. There are instances in life that defy explanation, moments when time loses shape and everything familiar slips into silence. For Eliza, that moment came not with panic, but with disbelief. 1 second, she was standing at the edge of the pool, fully engaged in a routine she had performed countless times. The next, she was weightless, immersed in a world that no longer obeyed the rhythm she had come to know. As the water enveloped her, the shock wasn't immediate pain, but a strange disorientation. Nero had closed the space between them in a single motion. The force she felt was overwhelming, not cruel, but absolute, a surge of raw power, untamed and unfiltered. Her first breath was swallowed by the water as she tried to regain balance, mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. Above, the crowd's cheers faltered, confusion beginning to ripple through the stands. Eliza had always believed in communication not just through signs, but through presence. She had read Nero's energy for years, trusted it. In their shared performances, she often said it felt like dancing with the sea. But now, the current had changed. She was no longer leading the steps. She was being carried. For a brief moment, her head broke the surface. The world around her was a blur of noise and flashing light. She gasped, instinctively reaching out not with fear, but with a plea for understanding. Her eyes scanned for help, for something to ground her. Then the water took her again. Staff near the pool rushed into motion, their movements swift but measured. Nets were prepared, signals deployed, and radio calls exchanged. From the outside, it may have still looked like a disruption in choreography, a glitch in the show. But those closest to the edge began to sense otherwise. In the middle of it all, Eliza tried to hold on to what she knew. She searched Nero's eyes, hoping for the flicker of recognition that had always been there. But the look she found was not the one she had come to rely on. It held no aggression, no malice, only distance, as though the being before her had returned to something ancient and unreachable. This wasn't the Nero she had spent years beside. This was something older, something elemental. And in that silent exchange beneath the water's glassy surface, the truth settled like a stone. The bond she had trusted so deeply had shifted into something she no longer understood. It began with a flicker of confusion, a shift in atmosphere so slight it almost went unnoticed. One moment, the audience was leaning forward in their seats, waiting for the next breathtaking stunt. The next, silence swept over the front rows as heads tilted, unsure of what they were witnessing. Then came the murmurs, the pointing fingers, the first audible gasp as Eliza's body surfaced briefly, limp, pale, marked by a cloud of red spreading beneath her. What had been a moment of spectacle suddenly transformed into something no one could name. The tension fractured like glass. Spectators rose from their seats, voices rising with panic. Children clung to their parents. Cameras that once recorded joyful memories now caught scenes of fear. In the sea of seats, chaos unfurled in waves. At the pool's edge, staff began to move, not with performance poise, but with urgency. Security raced down aisles, their radios alive with overlapping voices. The alarm pierced through the stadium, shrill and immediate. Above all this, the sound of rushing water and frantic shouting collided into an overwhelming wall of noise. Eliza broke the surface again. Her hand rose weakly, trembling in a desperate motion. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, searched the world around her, a world that was now blurred, distant, surreal. She gasped for air, but it barely reached her lungs before the water took her once more. The audience, by now fully aware, erupted in horrified cries. From the sidelines, trainers threw nets into the pool, their faces drawn tight with fear and disbelief. They called Nero's name, signaled in every way they had been taught, but nothing reached him. He remained submerged, circling with a singular focus, his movements detached from the voices around him. The usual control they had relied on felt absent, dissolved into the water. In that swelling confusion, people wept openly. Some begged for help aloud, as if willing the nightmare to end. Others turned away, unable to watch. And yet, through it all, eyes remained fixed on the pool's surface, waiting, hoping, dreading. Eliza rose one final time. Her body barely broke the surface, her face ashen, hair clinging to her cheeks. Her gaze met the open sky above, as if searching for something beyond the glass dome. There was no cry for help, no visible struggle, only the stunned stillness of someone who had realized the moment had come. Her eyes didn't close, but her expression held no anger, no blame, just the quiet terror of facing something she never expected. And then, the water reclaimed her. At exactly 2:55 in the afternoon, the weight of finality settled over Oceanica Dome. The water, once alive with choreographed motion and thunderous applause, now lay still. From the edge of the pool, Eliza's body was gently pulled onto the wet concrete, unmoving, soaked, silent. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her limbs slack, her expression empty. The urgency around her remained, but its rhythm had shifted. It was no longer about saving a life. It was about honoring the attempt. Emergency responders surrounded her. Movements were swift and mechanical defibrillator pads pressed to her chest. Compressions delivered in perfect count. Breaths forced into lungs no longer willing. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. The effort was symbolic now. The life that had once radiated from Eliza Morgan was already gone. The arena had fallen into a kind of stunned quiet. The alarm had faded. The shouting ceased. What remained was the soft hum of machinery, the low murmur of disbelief, and the occasional, uncontrollable sob that echoed like a crack in glass. The thousands who had gathered to watch a celebration of nature's beauty now stood still, uncertain of how to process what they had witnessed. Slowly, people began to file out, not with the energy of a crowd, but with the silence of mourners. Inside the trainer's lounge, no one spoke. The room, usually filled with pre-show chatter and post-performance laughter, had been hollowed out. A young trainer sat hunched in a corner, eyes red, a damp towel clutched tightly in her hands. Her whisper, barely audible, carried the weight of something irreparable. She always believed he'd never hurt her. There were no answers, only the realization that everything they knew had changed. Back at the pool, the spotlight no longer shined. The music had long since stopped. Nero floated near the surface, his massive body cutting gentle paths through the still water. He showed no sign of disturbance, no agitation, no recognition of the events that had just unfolded. His slow, steady circles gave the illusion of calm, as if the tragedy had never happened. And perhaps, for him, it hadn't. In his world, unspoken rules and instinct reigned. The connection that Eliza had believed unbreakable had faded without warning, leaving behind questions no one was prepared to answer. The dome, once vibrant and echoing with joy, now held only silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy stillness that settles in the wake of something too devastating to speak aloud. In the days that followed, grief gave way to questions. What had seemed impossible only a week before now demanded explanation. Eliza's death was not simply a tragic accident. It was a rupture that refused to be sealed. Investigators from wildlife protection agencies, workplace safety authorities, and independent reporters descended upon Oceanica Dome. The calm that settled after the incident was deceptive beneath it. Something volatile was beginning to stir. The coroner's report, released quietly but swiftly, laid out the facts. Eliza had sustained multiple blunt force injuries, consistent with high-impact collisions. Her lungs showed signs of repeated submersion. Cause of death, traumatic drowning. But those words, clinical and precise, couldn't answer the deeper question that echoed through the halls of the facility. Why had it happened? The answer began to take shape, not through official statements, but through documents that surfaced behind closed doors. Internal records, never meant for public view, began leaking to journalists and former staff. Training logs noted moments when Nero had resisted commands or disappeared mid-session. Incident reports documented tail slaps directed at trainers, instances of food refusal and agitation during routines. None of it had been released before. None of it had been addressed publicly. Behind the polished image of Oceanica Dome lay a different story, one of caution ignored, of image prioritized over insight. Trainers had spoken up, warnings were written, concerns were shared in hushed meetings and internal memos. But the narrative remained unchanged. Nero was the star. He was reliable. He was safe. Public relations depended on that myth. A powerful, well-trained Orca drew crowds, sold merchandise, and built reputations. To acknowledge Nero's instability would risk more than just ticket sales. It would challenge the foundation of the entire operation. So, slowly and deliberately, red flags were buried. In a televised interview, a former trainer sat in dim light, voice trembling beneath a practiced calm. We all saw it. Nero had his days. There were moments, but no one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. And Eliza, she believed in him more than any of us. Her words struck a chord deeper than statistics ever could. For those who had admired Eliza, who had learned from her, trained beside her, or simply watched her lead with grace, the revelations felt like betrayal, not just by Nero, but by the system they had trusted. A system that promised safety through control, when in truth, it had relied on silence. What had once been a story about a tragic anomaly now became something else entirely, a reckoning with everything that had been hidden beneath the surface. The skies above Oceanica Dome hung heavy with gray on the morning of Eliza's memorial. Rain never fell, but the clouds held the weight of it as if nature itself paused in stillness. Inside the amphitheater, a quiet crowd gathered, not for spectacle, but remembrance. Colleagues, loved ones, past guests, and even strangers filled the rows, drawn by grief, respect, and something deeper, the need to make sense of a loss that still didn't feel real. At the center of the stage hung a single photograph. Eliza stood beside the pool, smiling with quiet warmth, one hand touching the water. Nero hovered beside her, his massive body framed in sunlight. In the photo, there was trust, connection. That image, once used to promote the show, now spoke with a different tone, one of innocence lost. Speaker after speaker took to the microphone, voices wavering but composed. A senior trainer called Eliza a light in deep waters, someone whose presence calmed even the most unpredictable animals. A childhood friend remembered her fascination with the ocean, the way she would talk about whales as if they were family. Another described her dream not just to train orcas, but to bridge the distance between wild creatures and the human world. But as the stories unfolded, so too did the larger questions. Her death had shaken something loose. What was once accepted now felt unbearable to ignore. Could a being like Nero, born for the open sea, truly thrive in the confines of a tank? If someone as deeply committed and compassionate as Eliza could not prevent tragedy, what hope remained for others? In the days after her passing, thousands signed petitions demanding an end to orca captivity. Conservation groups released statements condemning marine entertainment programs, urging the transition towards sanctuary-based alternatives. Eliza's name began to appear not just in obituaries, but in calls for reform, her life and loss reshaping the public dialogue. For many, she became more than a trainer. She became a symbol of love, of dedication, and of the cost of silence. Beyond the ceremony, the pool remained still. Nero continued his endless laps, a solitary figure in the filtered blue. No one could say what he remembered, or if he understood what had changed. He moved without urgency, without pause, as he always had. But something unspoken hung in the space between each pass, the absence of a presence that had once defined his world. A bond had been broken, a life had ended, and a system once thought untouchable now stood exposed. Eliza's dream had always been to build a bridge between two worlds. In the end, she may have done just that, not through performance, but through consequence. And in doing so, she left behind a legacy far greater than applause. Eliza Morgan's story is not just a tragedy, it's a reflection of everything we choose to overlook. She dedicated her life to understanding and loving creatures most people fear. And yet, in the place she believed was a sanctuary, that love was met with silence, denial, and ultimately, loss. Her death wasn't just the result of one orca's actions, it was the outcome of a system that placed entertainment over ethics, profit over truth. If someone as experienced, compassionate, and intuitive as Eliza couldn't escape the consequences of captivity, what does that say about the world we've built for animals like Nero? Her legacy forces us to ask hard questions, not just about marine parks, but about our relationship with nature as a whole. Let this story be more than a cautionary tale. Let it be a call to empathy, to awareness, and to change. If Eliza's voice is no longer here to speak for them, then maybe it's time we did. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps bring these untold truths to light.